At my birthday lunch, I heard my nephew say, "Good thing we're putting that miserable old hag in a home. She's becoming a burden." On Monday, he turned pale when he saw me freezing the family's finances. The words kept replaying in my mind as I sat there, fork suspended midair, my chicken salad suddenly tasteless. The restaurant noise faded into a distant hum as I processed what I'd just overheard. My grandson Jason, not my nephew as I'd mistakenly thought in my shock, the boy I'd helped raise after my daughter's divorce, had just called me a miserable old hag. I carefully set my fork down, my arthritic fingers trembling slightly. Before we continue, comment where you're watching from and subscribe to the channel. We'd love to see how far our stories are reaching. At 68, I wasn't ancient, but apparently to Jason, I was nothing but a burden to be discarded. I'd stepped away from our table to use the restroom and was returning when I heard them. Jason and his wife Amanda huddled with my daughter Beth in the corner of the private dining room. They hadn't noticed me standing just around the corner. "It's for her own good," Beth had added, her voice lower but still audible. "Mom can't keep living alone in that big house." My memory slipping? I solved the New York Times crossword puzzle every morning and managed my investment portfolio better than the financial advisor my late husband Frank had insisted we hire. "Plus," Amanda chimed in, "once we sell the house, there'll be plenty to cover the facility costs and still have some left over for—" "Shh, she's coming back," Jason interrupted, spotting me. I plastered a smile on my face and eased back into my chair. "What did I miss?" "Nothing important, Grandma Eleanor," Jason said, flashing the charming smile that had gotten him out of trouble since he was 5. I nodded, pretending to believe him as the server brought out the birthday cake. They sang "Happy Birthday" with their perfect smiles, and I blew out the candles, wishing for something I'd never expected to need. Strength for what I now realized I had to do. Later that evening, alone in the house Frank and I had bought 40 years ago, I sat in my study surrounded by photo albums. There we were, young and hopeful, standing in front of this colonial-style home. Here was Beth's childhood, and here was Jason as a gap-toothed 7-year-old, moving in with me after Beth's marriage fell apart. I'd stepped in, rearranging my life to raise him. I'd attended every soccer game and written the checks for his education at Dartmouth. I'd even given Beth and Jason access to my accounts years ago when I had that knee surgery. I'd never thought to revoke that access. They were family, after all. My fingers traced the edge of a photo showing Jason at his college graduation, my arm around his shoulder, both of us beaming. Had it all been an act? How long had they been planning to ship me off and divvy up what I'd spent a lifetime building? I closed the album and walked to my desk, where my laptop sat next to the framed photo of Frank. His kind eyes seemed to be watching me, and I could almost hear his voice. "Eleanor, don't let anyone walk all over you, not even family." I opened my laptop and began to search for information on elder rights and financial protection. By midnight, I had a plan. The next morning, I made an appointment with Gerald Wilson, our family attorney. When I mentioned elderly financial abuse, his receptionist found an opening for that afternoon. "Eleanor, I'm concerned by what you're telling me," Gerald said after I explained what I'd overheard. "Have you noticed any unusual activity in your accounts?" "I haven't checked recently," I admitted. "Frank always handled the finances until he passed." Gerald nodded sympathetically. "Let's take a look right now." What we found made my blood run cold. Over the past year, there had been dozens of withdrawals and transfers, small enough to not raise immediate alarm but totaling nearly $45,000. Most had been initiated by Jason. "This," Gerald pointed to a series of transfers, "appears to be money, moving from your savings account to a joint account, and then to accounts I don't recognize. Can we track where it went?" My voice sounded strangely calm. "We can. And Eleanor, you have options. This is elder financial abuse, and it's illegal." Over the weekend, I gathered all my financial documents. I discovered credit card charges for restaurants I'd never visited and electronic stores where I'd never shopped. They'd been siphoning money systematically, probably testing to see what they could get away with before the big move. By Monday morning, I was ready. I called Jason and asked him to meet me at Meridian Bank at 11 a.m. "Is everything okay, Grandma?" he asked, sounding concerned. "Yes, dear. I just need some help organizing my finances. You're so good with money matters." At the bank, Marjorie Davis, the manager who had known Frank and me for 20 years, was waiting. She gave me a subtle nod. She knew why we were there. "Jason, I'm planning to consolidate some accounts," I explained as we sat down in Marjorie's office. That sounds smart, Grandma, he said, already reaching for his phone. Actually, I said, sliding a document across the desk, I've already decided what's best. Marjorie, please proceed with freezing all joint accounts and removing access privileges. Jason's head snapped up. Wait, what? Marjorie began typing at her computer. All joint accounts are now frozen pending investigation and all external access privileges have been revoked. Investigation? Jason's voice rose an octave. I met his eyes. Directly. I think you know, Jason. The unauthorized transfers, the credit card charges, the plans to put me in a home and sell my house. His face drained of color until he looked almost gray. You don't understand. I understand perfectly, I said, my voice steady despite my breaking heart. I heard you at the restaurant calling me a miserable old hag. A burden. I didn't mean, he stumbled over his words. Mrs. Westfield has also authorized us to provide account records to her attorney, Marjorie continued. The bank takes potential financial exploitation very seriously. Jason looked from Marjorie to me, realization dawning in his eyes. This wasn't a senile old woman making confused accusations. This was a calculated response to his betrayal. Grandma, please, he began, his voice low and urgent. We can talk about this? Yes, I agreed, gathering my purse as I stood up. We will talk about this, but not today. Today, I'm taking back control of my life and my finances. I suggest you use the time to think about your actions and prepare to explain where my $45,000 went. I walked out of the bank with my back straight and my head high, leaving my grandson staring after me, his face a mask of shock and fear. For the first time in years, despite the pain searing through my heart, I felt something unexpected, powerful. The drive home from the bank was a blur. My hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, knuckles white. Only when I pulled into my driveway did I allow myself to breathe. I sat there, staring at the maple tree Frank had planted when we first moved in. It had grown strong over 40 years, its roots deep and stable. Unlike my family, it seemed. My phone buzzed with incoming calls. Beth, Jason, Amanda. I silenced it and walked inside. My sanctuary felt different now, as if the walls themselves had witnessed a betrayal. I made tea with trembling hands and settled at the kitchen table. 3 missed calls from Beth, 5 from Jason, a text. Grandma, please pick up. This is all. A misunderstanding. As if I hadn't heard his cruel words with my own ears. As if the bank statements didn't tell their own story. The doorbell rang. I ignored it. Then came the knocking, persistent and urgent. Mom, I know you're in there. Beth's voice carried through the door. We need to talk about this. I sipped my tea, letting the warmth spread through my chest. Beth had always been headstrong. But I wasn't going to be bullied in my own home. Eventually, the knocking stopped. My phone pinged with a message from Beth. This isn't fair. You're not giving us a chance to explain. Fair? What was fair about stealing from your own mother? What was fair about plotting to put me away like an old coat no longer in style? By evening, my resolve had hardened. I called Gerald. They're trying to contact me, I told him. What should I do? Don't engage yet, he advised. We need to finish documenting everything first. Have you checked your other accounts? Investment portfolios? I spent the night combing through statements, discovering more disturbing patterns. Small withdrawals from my investments, changes to beneficiaries on some accounts, a recent inquiry about my reverse mortgage options. The next morning, a certified letter arrived from Gerald's office to be delivered to Beth and Jason. It formally notified them of the financial investigation and demanded full accounting of all misappropriated funds. Hours later, my doorbell rang again. This time I saw Margaret, my neighbor of 30 years, through the peephole. Eleanor? She said when I opened the door. Beth was here earlier. She said you're having some kind of breakdown, that you're paranoid and freezing your accounts. She asked if I'd check on you. I invited Margaret in and told her everything over coffee. Her expression shifted from concern to outrage. Those ungrateful? She stopped herself. I never would have thought it of them, especially Jason. You practically raised that boy. That's what hurts the most, I admitted, my voice breaking. I could almost understand Beth. She's always been selfish. But Jason, I thought he loved me. Margaret reached across the table and squeezed my hand. He probably does, in his way. but love gets tangled up with money and convenience. That afternoon, I drove to the senior center where I volunteered. Director Susan Hamilton welcomed me warmly, but I could see the question in her eyes. "Your daughter called," she explained. "She said you might not be coming in because you're struggling." "Did she suggest dementia?" I asked bluntly. Susan looked uncomfortable. She mentioned memory concerns. I laughed bitterly. How convenient. If I'm losing my mind, then my accusations can't be trusted. I showed Susan the bank statements. As a social worker who specialized in elder issues, her perspective mattered to me. "Financial elder abuse is shockingly common," she said sadly, "even from family. But most seniors are too ashamed to fight back." "I'm not most seniors," I replied. Susan connected me with a support group for seniors who had experienced family exploitation. She also recommended a security service to ensure no one could enter my home uninvited. 5 days later, Gerald called with news. "We've traced most of the missing funds," he said. "Jason used your money for stock market gambles. He lost heavily. There were also purchases at luxury stores and weekend trips for him and Amanda." My chest tightened. "And Beth?" "She knew," Gerald confirmed. "Some transfers went to her account too. And we found emails between them discussing the assisted living plan. They've been researching facilities for months, cheap ones despite what they told you." I closed my eyes, absorbing this final confirmation. "What do we do now?" "We have options," Gerald explained. "We can pursue criminal charges, or we can handle it civilly, demanding repayment and setting legal boundaries." I thought about Jason as a child, gap-toothed and trusting. About Beth as a teenager, difficult but still my daughter. The idea of seeing them in court made me physically ill. "Let's start with a family meeting," I decided. "On my terms, in your office." Gerald arranged it for the following Monday. The weekend dragged, filled with more desperate messages. Amanda called my friends, spinning tales about my mental decline. They even contacted my doctor, who thankfully refused to discuss my health without my consent. Monday arrived cold and rainy. I dressed carefully in a blue suit Frank had always loved. In the mirror, I saw not a frail old woman, but someone with dignity and resolve. Gerald's conference room felt like neutral territory. I arrived first, taking the seat at the head of the table. Gerald sat beside me, legal pad ready. When Jason and Beth entered, both looked like they hadn't slept in days. Amanda trailed behind, her usual confidence nowhere to be seen. None of them would meet my eyes. "Thank you for coming," I began, my voice steady. "We have serious matters to discuss." Jason looked up, his face desperate. "Grandma, please." I held up my hand. "I trusted you, both of you, and you betrayed that trust. You stole from me. You plotted to put me away against my will." Beth shifted uncomfortably. "Mom, we were just worried about you living alone." "Were you worried when you accepted transfers from my accounts?" I asked coldly. Her face flushed red. Jason stared at the table. "Here's what's going to happen," I continued. "Gerald has prepared documents outlining every unauthorized transaction. You will repay every cent." "I don't have that kind of money," Jason said quietly. "Then you'll establish a payment plan," Gerald interjected. "The alternative is pressing charges." Amanda gasped. Jason paled further. "You wouldn't," Beth whispered. "We're family." "Family doesn't steal from family," I replied, my heart breaking. "Family doesn't call a grandmother a miserable old hag." For the first time, tears welled in Jason's eyes. I didn't mean it. I was frustrated about money. "We're underwater on our mortgage, so you decided to solve your problems with my money? With my house? With my freedom?" No one answered. The silence stretched, heavy with shame. "Sign the repayment agreement," Gerald finally said, sliding documents across the table. One by one, they signed. As they prepared to leave, Jason hesitated. "Grandma," he started, voice breaking. "I'm so sorry." I looked at my grandson, this man I had raised and loved who had betrayed me so completely, and felt the full weight of what had been lost. "No," I said simply. But trust, once broken, isn't easily repaired. As they filed out, Beth turned at the door. Will we ever be a family again?" I thought about birthdays and holidays stretching ahead, about empty chairs and awkward silences. "I don't know," I answered honestly. "That depends on what happens next." 2 weeks after the meeting in Gerald's office, An uneasy silence settled over my life. Beth and Jason had stopped calling. The repayment plan was in place, small monthly installments that would take years to cover what they had taken. Gerald assured me it was legally binding, but I wondered if they would honor it once the immediate shock wore off. I sat on my porch swing, watching the neighborhood children ride bikes in the late afternoon sun. My home security system had been upgraded, new locks installed, my financial accounts reorganized with Gerald's help. I'd even started taking a self-defense class at the senior center. But despite these precautions, I felt vulnerable, not physically, but emotionally. The betrayal had left a wound deeper than I'd anticipated. My phone chimed with a message from Margaret. "Dinner at my place tonight? Made your favorite pot roast." These small kindnesses had become my lifeline. Margaret. Susan. From the senior center. The other members of my support group. They filled spaces in my days that family once occupied. After dinner at Margaret's, I returned home to find a letter in my mailbox. Jason's handwriting. I carried it inside, holding it like it might burn my fingers, and set it on the kitchen counter while I made tea. Finally, I opened it. "Dear Grandma," it began. "I know saying sorry isn't enough, but I am sorry. More than I can express. What I did was unforgivable. What I said was cruel. There's no excuse. I've started therapy to understand why I did this to someone I love. I hope someday you might find it in your heart to give me another chance. With deepest regret, Jason." No mention of the money. No mention of Beth or Amanda. No request to visit or call. Just words on paper. I folded the letter and tucked it into my desk drawer, not ready to decide how I felt about it. The next morning, I met with my new financial advisor, Denise Chen, a sharp woman in her 40s recommended by Gerald. "We've secured your accounts and investments," she explained, reviewing the documents spread across her desk. "But we need to discuss your long-term financial planning. Your previous arrangements listed Beth and Jason as your financial proxies. We need to change that." I nodded, feeling a pang. "Who would you recommend? Do you have other family you trust? Friends? It should be someone who understands finance or is willing to work with a professional." I thought about my remaining family. A cousin in Arizona I barely spoke to. Frank's brother in Florida who called once a year at Christmas. "I'll need to think about it," I said finally. "Take your time," Denise advised. "But don't leave it unresolved for too long. Everyone needs someone in their corner." That evening, I attended my support group at the senior center. 8 of us sat in a circle sharing stories of betrayal and resilience. Theodore, a retired accountant, had discovered his son emptying his bank accounts. Marion's granddaughter had forged her signature on loan documents. Gloria's children had sold her home while she was hospitalized. When my turn came, I shared Jason's letter. "Do you believe he's genuinely sorry?" asked Gloria. "I think he's sorry he got caught," Theodore huffed. "Maybe both," I admitted. He was always good at telling adults what they wanted to hear, even as a child. Afterward, Susan pulled me aside. "There's a workshop next week on rebuilding after family breach. It might help you decide what kind of relationship, if any, you want with Beth and Jason going forward." I signed up, grateful for the guidance. The hardest part of this journey was navigating the gray area between protecting myself and isolating myself. The following Sunday, I decided to attend a different church than my usual one. Beth and Jason knew my routine too well. The new congregation welcomed me warmly, and the pastor's sermon on forgiveness versus wisdom struck a chord. "Forgiveness doesn't mean allowing someone to hurt you again," he said. "It means freeing yourself from the burden of resentment." As I was leaving, a tall woman with silver hair approached me. "You're new here. I'm Dorothy." We chatted, and when I mentioned living alone, she smiled. "Me too. 20 years now, since Harold passed. It gets easier." We exchanged numbers, and I felt a small opening, a possibility of new connections to replace the ones that had broken. On Tuesday, Beth showed up unannounced at my door. Through the security system's camera, I could see her shifting nervously on the porch. "Mom, please. Open up. We need to talk." I hesitated, then pressed the intercom. "I'm not ready, Beth." "You can't shut us out forever," she protested. "We're still family." "Family respects boundaries," I replied. "I'll contact you when I'm ready to talk." She left eventually, but her visit unsettled me. That night, I couldn't sleep, turning over different versions of our relationship in my mind. Could we ever rebuild trust? Did I even want to? By morning, I had made a decision. I called Gerald. I want to update my will, I told him. And I need to designate new people for my medical and financial proxies. I'll prepare the paperwork, he said. Have you decided who you'll appoint? Not yet, I admitted. But I'm working on it. I spent the next few days reflecting on the people who had supported me through this crisis. Margaret, with her practical wisdom. Susan, with her professional guidance. Dorothy, with her understanding of life alone. They weren't family by blood, but they had shown me more care than my own flesh and blood. On Friday, I received another letter, this time from Beth. Unlike Jason's, it was defensive, filled with justifications, about how they'd only been trying to help me, how they'd made some mistakes, but their intentions were good. I placed it in the drawer with Jason's letter, a growing archive of broken trust. The next week brought a surprising call from Amanda. Eleanor, she began hesitantly, I know I'm probably the last person you want to hear from. You're right about that, I agreed. I've left Jason, she said, her voice cracking. After seeing how he treated you, what we did to you, I realized this isn't who I want to be. I remained silent, unsure what response she expected. I don't expect forgiveness, she continued. I just wanted you to know that what happened has had consequences beyond what you might see. After she hung up, I sat in my garden watching bees flit between late summer flowers. Amanda's call had revealed something important. The fractures in my family weren't just between them and me. The betrayal had exposed weaknesses in all their relationships. That evening, I attended the workshop Susan had recommended. The facilitator, a family therapist, talked about establishing healthy boundaries. Many seniors feel obligated to maintain relationships with family members who have hurt them, she explained. But you have the right to protect yourself. You can choose the level of contact that feels safe for you. Afterward, I approached her with my question. How do I create a new support system at my age? She smiled warmly. The same way we do at any age, one connection at a time. The difference is that now you can choose your family. The concept struck me like a revelation. Choose my family, not to replace Beth and Jason, but to build a network of people who respected and valued me. I left the center with a lightness I hadn't felt in weeks. The path forward wasn't about cutting off my blood relatives forever or pretending the hurt never happened. It was about rebuilding my life on my terms, with people who had earned my trust. That night, I made a list of the people who could become my chosen family. Margaret, Susan, Dorothy, 2 friends from my book club who had checked on me regularly. Theodore from the support group, whose financial expertise might make him a good proxy. For the first time since that fateful birthday lunch, I felt something unexpected, hope. Not for reconciliation with Beth and Jason, that would take years if it happened at all, but for a future that wasn't defined by their betrayal. I was building something new from the ashes of what had burned. And unlike before, I was doing it, with my eyes wide open. A month passed. Autumn settled over the neighborhood, the maple trees ablaze with red and gold. I had just finished breakfast when the phone rang. It was Jason. Grandma, he said, voice hesitant. I know you're still upset, but something's happened. I remained silent, waiting. Amanda left me, he continued. She's filing for divorce, and I'm having trouble making the mortgage payment. There it was. The real reason for his call. I'm sorry to hear that, I said carefully. The thing is, he pressed on, I was wondering if we could revisit the repayment plan. Maybe make the payments smaller or extend the timeline. My hand tightened around the phone. Once I would have sacrificed anything to help him. Now I recognized the manipulation. The repayment plan stands as agreed, I said firmly. Your financial problems are not my responsibility, Jason. But Grandma, I could lose the house. Perhaps you should have thought of that before taking my money. A long pause. You've changed, he finally said, accusation in his tone. Yes, I agreed. I have. After hanging up, I sat in my sunroom, unsettled by the call. Not by Jason's predicament. That was the natural consequence of his actions, but by my own response. The old Eleanor would have crumbled, would have found a way to help him despite everything. This new version of myself felt both unfamiliar and right. Margaret stopped by that afternoon with homemade apple pie. Jason called me, she said as we settled at the kitchen table. Wanted me to talk to you about the repayment plan. I sighed, cutting slices of the still warm pie. He's trying to work around me. I told him I'm not getting involved, Margaret assured me. His mess, his cleanup. He said I've changed, I admitted. And he didn't mean it as a compliment. Margaret smiled wryly. Of course he didn't. You've stopped being his ATM. The next day brought an unexpected visitor, Beth's husband, Richard. We had never been close. He traveled frequently for work and often missed family gatherings. I was surprised when my security system showed him at the door. Eleanor, he greeted me awkwardly when I let him in. I hope I'm not intruding. We sat in the living room, the coffee I offered untouched between us. Beth doesn't know I'm here, he admitted. But I needed to understand what happened. She's been difficult since this all blew up. I gave him the facts without embellishment. The overheard conversation, the financial investigation, the confrontation at the bank. Richard listened, his expression growing increasingly troubled. I knew about the assisted living plans, he confessed. Beth said you were struggling, that it was the best option for everyone, and you believed her. He had the grace to look ashamed. I travel so much, I didn't question it. And the money? I pressed. Did you know about that? No, he said firmly. Absolutely not. Beth handles our finances while I'm away. If she received money from your accounts, I was unaware. I wasn't sure whether to believe him. Why are you here, Richard? He sighed heavily. Beth is talking about contesting the changes to your will. She says you're not of sound mind, that Jason manipulated you, and now you're punishing everyone. My blood ran cold. I'm perfectly competent. Any court would confirm that. I know, he agreed quickly. I'm not here to threaten you. I'm trying to prevent Beth from making another mistake. After he left, I called Gerald immediately to warn him about Beth's potential legal challenge. He wasn't concerned. We've documented everything thoroughly, he assured me. Your competency is well established. Beth would waste a lot of money on a battle she can't win, but she might try anyway, I pointed out. She never did know when to admit defeat. 2 days later, I received formal notice from Beth's attorney requesting a competency evaluation. Gerald handled the response, arranging for me to be evaluated by 2 independent specialists. Both confirmed what I already knew. I was mentally sound and fully capable of managing my own affairs. Beth's legal challenge collapsed before it truly began. The judge dismissed her petition, citing the overwhelming evidence of Mrs. Westfield's competency and concerning evidence of attempted financial exploitation by the petitioner. The victory should have felt satisfying, but instead, it left me hollow. Beth had actually tried to have me declared incompetent, to take away my autonomy, all to protect herself and regain access to my money. That evening, Dorothy invited me to dinner at her home, a cozy bungalow filled with books and mementos from her travels. I heard about the court decision, she said, serving chicken pot pie. That can't have been easy, having your own daughter challenge your competency. The worst part, I confided, is realizing how little I knew my own children. I thought I raised them with values, with character. Dorothy nodded thoughtfully. My Harold used to say we can plant the seeds, but we can't control what grows. What happened with your children? I asked, realizing I knew little about her family. My son lives in Seattle, calls every Sunday like clockwork. My daughter. She trailed off. We haven't spoken in 15 years. May I ask why? She married a man who controlled every aspect of her life. When I expressed concern, she chose him. Sometimes the distance isn't our choice. Her words stayed with me as I drove home under a canopy of stars. Perhaps the fracture in my family wasn't entirely about money. Perhaps it had been building for years, concealed beneath holiday dinners and birthday celebrations. The following week, I made my final decision. I invited Theodore from my support group to lunch and asked if he would serve as my financial proxy. With his background in accounting and his own experience with family betrayal, he understood the significance of what I was asking. I'd be honored, he said solemnly, and I promised to handle the responsibility with absolute integrity. For my medical proxy, I chose Margaret. We'd been friends for decades, and I trusted her to make decisions that respected my wishes. With Gerald's help, I finalized all the legal documents. My new will divided my estate between several beneficiaries: a scholarship fund at the local community college, the senior center, and a trust for Jason's children, my great-grandchildren. that would be managed by the bank until they turned 25, bypassing their parents entirely. I allocated a small portion to Beth and Jason, enough to show I hadn't forgotten them, but not enough to fight over. The house would be sold, with proceeds going to the scholarship fund. When the paperwork was complete, I felt as if a weight had lifted. I had protected myself and created a legacy that reflected my values, not my family's expectations. That night, I sat on my porch swing, watching fireflies rise from the grass like stardust. The future stretched before me, uncertain but filled with possibility. I had spent so many years defining myself as a mother, a grandmother, placing their needs above my own. Now, I was rediscovering who Eleanor Westfield was beneath those roles. The betrayal had broken something precious, but in the breaking, it had freed me to build something new. A life shaped by choice rather than obligation, by joy rather than duty. Darkness fell. I went inside and opened my address book. There were places I wanted to see, experiences I'd postponed while raising children and caring for Frank. Perhaps it was time for Eleanor's grand adventure. I picked up the phone and dialed Dorothy's number. Remember how you mentioned wanting to see the Grand Canyon? What would you say to a road trip this spring? Her delighted response sealed the decision. I was no longer waiting for my family to determine my happiness. I was claiming it for myself, one decisive move at a time. Winter settled over the neighborhood, bringing with it a hushed stillness I found comforting. 6 months had passed since that fateful birthday lunch. 6 months since my world had tilted on its axis, revealing the rot beneath what I'd thought was solid ground. I had just finished decorating a small Christmas tree, more out of habit than celebration, when the doorbell rang. Through the security camera, I saw Beth standing on the porch, a wrapped gift in her hands and an uncertain expression on her face. I hesitated before opening the door. Our only communication in months had been through attorneys. "Hi, Mom," she said tentatively. I thought maybe we could talk. I let her in, more curious than welcoming. She placed the gift on the coffee table but didn't sit down, her eyes taking in the modest decorations. "No big tree this year?" she asked. "No need," I replied. "I'm not hosting Christmas dinner." The statement hung between us. For 30 years, I had presided over elaborate holiday gatherings, cooking for days, and accommodating everyone's preferences and schedules. "That's partly why I'm here," Beth said, finally settling on the edge of the sofa. "Richard and I are hosting this year. We'd like you to come." I studied my daughter, noting the new lines around her eyes, the slightly desperate quality in her voice. "Why?" The bluntness of my question caught her off guard. Because it's Christmas, because you're my mother. I was your mother when you planned to put me in a home against my will. I was your mother when you accepted stolen money from my accounts. Beth's face flushed. "I've apologized for that." "Have you?" I countered. "All I remember is you trying to have me declared incompetent when I stood up for myself." Tears welled in her eyes. "What do you want from me, Mom? I made mistakes, terrible ones, but do I have to pay for them forever?" I felt a flash of anger. "Consequences aren't punishment, Beth. They're the natural result of your choices." We sat in strained silence before she spoke again. "Jason will be there, with the kids. And Amanda?" Beth shook her head. "The divorce was finalized last month." "I see." I hadn't heard about the divorce being completed. "How is he?" "Struggling," Beth admitted. "He had to sell the house. He's living in an apartment now, trying to rebuild." I nodded, absorbing this information without the guilt she clearly hoped to provoke. "I'm sorry for his difficulties, but they're not my responsibility." Beth looked down at her hands. "He misses you. We all do. You miss the convenience I provided." I corrected her. "The free childcare, the financial safety net, the holiday hosting. That's not fair," she protested weakly. "Isn't it?" I stood up, suddenly tired of the conversation. "Thank you for the invitation, but I have other plans for Christmas." It wasn't entirely true. Dorothy had invited me to join her family's gathering, but I hadn't committed yet, unsure about spending the holiday with strangers. Beth rose, disappointment evident in her posture. "Will you at least open your gift?" I unwrapped the package carefully, revealing a photo album. Inside were pictures spanning decades. My wedding to Frank, Beth's childhood, Jason as a baby, family vacations and celebrations. On the last page was a recent photo of Beth, Richard, Jason, and his children, with an empty space beside them. "We're still your family," Beth said softly, "despite everything." I closed the album, emotion tightening my throat. "I'll think about Christmas." After she left, I sat with the album open on my lap, memories washing over me. The photos showed smiling faces, perfect moments frozen in time. They didn't show the arguments, the disappointments, the growing distance as my children built their own lives with occasional visits out of obligation. Had it really been as idyllic as these images suggested? Or had I been seeing what I wanted to see all along? The next day, I visited the senior center for my weekly volunteer shift. Susan greeted me with concern. "You seem preoccupied," she noted as we sorted donations for the center's holiday gift drive. I told her about Beth's visit, the invitation, and my conflicted feelings. "What are you afraid would happen if you went?" Susan asked. The question caught me off guard. "I'm not afraid." Susan raised an eyebrow but didn't challenge me directly. "Sometimes the hardest family gatherings are the most important ones, not for them, but for us. For our own closure." Her words stayed with me as I drove home, snow beginning to fall in fat, lazy flakes. Was I avoiding Christmas with my family out of self-protection, or was I punishing them? And did the distinction matter? That evening, I received a text from Jason. "Mom said she invited you for Christmas. I hope you'll come. The kids ask about you." The mention of my great-grandchildren, Lily 7 and Ethan 5, touched a tender spot. They were innocent in all this. It wasn't their fault their father had betrayed me. I called Dorothy to discuss my dilemma. "What does your heart tell you?" she asked after listening patiently. "That's the problem," I confessed. "My heart is confused. Part of me wants to see the children. Part of me dreads facing Beth and Jason across the dinner table, pretending everything is normal." "Who says you have to pretend?" Dorothy challenged gently. "Perhaps what your family needs isn't your forgiveness yet, but your honesty." 3 days. Before Christmas, I made my decision. I called Beth. "I'll come for dessert," I said when she answered. "Not the whole dinner." "Oh," her surprise was evident. Yes, that would be wonderful." "Around 7? 7 is fine. And Beth? I'm not coming to pretend everything is fixed. I'm coming to see the children and to be honest about where we stand." A pause. "I understand." Christmas Eve arrived with a fresh blanket of snow. I spent the morning baking cookies with Dorothy, then attended a candlelight service at my new church. The simple rituals brought their own comfort. At home, I carefully wrapped gifts for Lily and Ethan, books I thought they might enjoy. For Beth and Richard, a donation to charity in their name. For Jason, nothing. I wasn't ready for that yet. Margaret drove me to Beth's house, promising to collect me after 2 hours. "Call if you need rescuing earlier," she insisted. Beth's home blazed with lights, a lavish Christmas tree visible through the front window. I straightened my shoulders, clutching my modest gifts, and rang the doorbell. Richard answered, "Surprise," flickering across his face. "Eleanor, come in. Let me take your coat." The house was warm and fragrant with holiday cooking. From the living room came the sound of children's laughter. "Grandma Elle!" Lily spotted me first, running over with unrestrained joy. Ethan followed, more shyly but with a gap-toothed smile that reminded me painfully of Jason at that age. For a few precious moments, I was simply a grandmother being hugged by her great-grandchildren. Then I looked up to see Jason watching from the doorway, uncertainty written across his features. "Hello, Jason," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Grandma," he nodded. "Thank you for coming." The awkwardness might have stretched indefinitely if Beth hadn't appeared, announcing that dessert was ready. Everyone moved to the dining room, where a spread of pies, cookies, and coffee awaited. I sat between the children, focusing on their excited chatter about Santa and presents. But eventually, after the desserts were consumed and the children distracted with new toys, the conversation turned inescapably to the elephant in the room. "I want to thank you," Jason said suddenly, setting down his coffee cup, "for forcing me to face what I'd become." I looked at him, startled by the directness. Losing the house, the divorce, the legal consequences, it all happened because of my choices, not yours, he continued. "I've been in therapy, trying to understand why I thought it was acceptable to steal from you, to lie to you." Beth reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "We both have a lot to atone for." I sat very still, absorbing their words. "I appreciate the acknowledgement," I said finally. It matters. Does it change anything? Beth asked cautiously. I considered the question, aware of Richard watching intently, of the children playing nearby, of the charged atmosphere thick with unspoken hopes and fears. It's a start, I said honestly. Not an end, but a start. Spring came suddenly, as it often does in New England. One day there was frost on the ground, the next, crocuses pushing through the soil. It had been nearly a year since my birthday lunch, a year of painful revelations and unexpected growth. I stood in my garden, trowel in hand, preparing the soil for new plantings. Dorothy sat nearby, reading from a travel guide, the Grand Canyon. At sunset, she enthused, is described as nature's masterpiece. Our road trip was just 2 weeks away. After months of planning, we were finally going to see the natural wonders we'd only admired in photographs. Eleanor, Dorothy said, are you really going through with selling this house? You've lived here for 40 years. I straightened, easing the ache in my back. Yes, the paperwork is already in motion. But where will you go when we return? I gestured toward the brochures on the table. I've narrowed it down to 3 senior communities. All have garden apartments and activities I enjoy. Dorothy looked skeptical. And this decision has nothing to do with Beth and Jason? They're part of it, I admitted. But not in the way you might think. I'm not running away. I'm moving towards something new. This house had been the center of my family life for decades. But since the betrayal, those memories had become tarnished, overlaid with the knowledge that the family I thought I had was partly an illusion. My phone chimed with a message from Jason. The kids' spring concert is Thursday at 7. They'd love if you could come. Since Christmas, I had cautiously allowed more contact with my family. Monthly dinners, occasional school events for the children. Brief, carefully managed interactions that kept firm boundaries in place. Will you go? Dorothy asked. Yes, I decided. For Lily and Ethan, Thursday evening found me seated in an elementary school auditorium, surprisingly comfortable between Beth and Richard. Jason sat on Beth's other side, looking tired but more at peace than I'd seen him in months. The children's performance was endearingly earnest, off-key singing, forgotten lines, and beaming faces. Lily spotted me in the audience and waved enthusiastically. Ethan, dressed as a frog, delivered his one line with solemn concentration. Afterward, Lily ran to me, still wearing her paper flower hat. Did you see me, Grandma L? Did you hear me? Sing? I knelt down, ignoring the protest in my knees. You were wonderful, sweetheart. Can you come for ice cream with us? Ethan appeared. Daddy says we can get sprinkles. I glanced up to see Jason watching us, a question in his eyes. Ice cream sounds lovely, I agreed. Later, at the ice cream parlor, I watched Lily and Ethan devour sundaes. Beth and Richard were, at the counter, leaving me momentarily alone with Jason. I heard you're selling the house, he said quietly. News travels fast, I observed. It's hard to imagine someone else living there. Change is inevitable, I replied. Are you? Are you happy? Grandma? The question caught me off guard. Was I happy? After everything that had happened? I'm content, I answered truthfully. I'm building a life that feels authentic to me now. It's different from what I imagined, but it has its own satisfactions. 2 days later, Gerald called with news. We have an offer on the house, a young couple with 2 small children, full asking price. I accepted immediately, surprised by how ready I felt. The weeks that followed passed in a whirlwind of activity, sorting through 40 years of accumulation, deciding what to keep, what to give away, what to sell. There were moments of sadness, but liberation too, in releasing objects that had outlived their meaning. The day before Dorothy and I were to leave for our road trip, I held a small gathering in the nearly empty house, my chosen family and my blood family, together in a farewell of sorts. A toast, Margaret proposed, to Eleanor, who taught us all that it's never too late to start over. Afterward, Jason lingered behind. I want you to have this, he said, handing me a small wooden box I had given him for his 10th birthday. Jason, this is yours. I protested. I want you to hold it for me, he insisted, until you feel I've earned back your trust, however long that takes. I accepted the box, understanding the symbolism of his gesture. The next morning, Dorothy and I loaded our suitcases into her SUV. Margaret came to see us off, promising to check on the house and collect my mail. As we pulled away, I looked back at the house one last time. The for sale sign had a red pending sticker across it now. Soon, another family would make their memories within those walls. As we merged onto the highway, heading west toward adventure, I felt a sense of possibility I hadn't experienced in years. The betrayal that had nearly broken me had instead freed me from expectations I didn't know I was carrying, freed me to discover who Eleanor Westfield could be in this final act of her life. I rolled down the window, letting the spring air rush in. At 69, I was starting over. Not running from the past, but stepping consciously into a future of my own design. I was finally writing my own story, on my own terms, and it felt like rebirth.